So, hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today is a very special episode. I have the pleasure to be joined by Josef Schiefer, who is one of our colleagues at Specific Group. He's responsible for engineering and product development at Ozgar.ai. Josef is someone with big tech experience, engineering management at AWS and Snowflake, worked on the Snowflake Unistore, so a veteran of the industry. And before we start talking about legacy systems and how we think about them, I'm very happy to say, hi, Josef, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm also looking forward to talking more about, exciting topics.
So, Josef, legacy systems, they're like gravity, right? They're invisible until they stop you from moving forward or until you fall. What is it about legacy systems that is often misunderstood? Let's start with that.
Yeah, good question. Legacy system, why we talk so much about legacy system? Just looking and reflecting about that. Well, legacy systems are important, otherwise we wouldn't talk about them. And because they're important, we want to keep them. We want to, usually legacy system handle mission critical systems. There is only one challenge very often with legacy systems, they come with a certain complexity. So the legacy systems typically have the reputation of being complex or being something special to them. Complexity is not necessarily in the way they are written. It can be the way they are managed, the way they function, the use case they cover. There's always some kind of complexity behind it. And that makes them more challenging, but from an engineering perspective, also more interesting.
Yeah, they're full of hidden wisdom. They've evolved over time, and it's usually the pain points are just various, but so are the advantages. We have seen people, they try to get rid of them, right? And sometimes that works, but sometimes that's prohibitively expensive. And companies are faced with the reality of having to maintain them over an extended period of time. What are the set of problems that arise with maintaining these systems?
I see also companies want to keep them as long as possible, right? Because they are working well, and as long as the system do their job and they work well, actually companies tend to not touch them and use them as long as they can. So legacy systems not necessarily always are a problem. The challenge always comes with new technologies or new requirements, then how to deal with these. And that's where the need comes more and more to, or the question is, should we move on with something else to cover also these new requirements? But overall, the legacy systems, when they worked for years, there's a reason why they stayed. Software systems, usually there's a natural way. When a software lives more than 5 years, it's a good software. Usually a software that doesn't function well is dead in very quickly, in a couple of years, and no one uses them. But when years are kept for decades, usually this is good software.
Yeah. I mean, that certainly is the case. And one could argue some of these systems, I mean, even the simplicity of the language, the way that they're not overridden with the newest concepts, it makes them, on the one hand, easy to maintain, but on the other hand, the skills are missing. Those are systems that have been written a long time ago. And there's often no documentation. The people who've written them, they've long, left the companies. What are practical things that the teams are battling with when they have to maintain these systems?
Well, challenges arise often when there are new requirements or a new system is within a company and that should be integrated. This is one challenge. Another challenge is every software requires some form of maintenance, whether it's for compliance reason or backups. And when you maintain a system, you need people that understand the system enough to start it, to reboot it, to do troubleshooting. And especially for very old system, this may be challenging. That I'm just as example for a COBOL application, to find someone who can actually changes or does restart an application or does some operations on a very old application. That there are a lot of people nowadays that wouldn't know how to do that, and also never learn it at the university or some normal education in software field wouldn't cover that anymore. So these are the challenges to revive these old methods and have sufficient knowledge to be able to operate with the system.
So coming back to, to your experience and also now what you're doing with Ozgar. For those that don't know, check Ozgar.ai, Ozgar with a Z. It's a very interesting piece of software that helps you, maintain, understand holistically your legacy applications, and is built around a very cool AI engine. What's kind of the angle that you go there? Is it like, okay, we're not escaping the legacy software, we're teaching it new tricks, and with the help of AI, we'll extend its life and we'll make using it cheaper, easier, and overall a much better experience, especially with regards to having the skills of humans plus AI in maintaining it.
Yeah, so we build Ozgar with the vision in mind to build a system that gives you insights on how an application works, right? An analytical tool, so to speak. And typically now an analytical tool gives you some good way of understanding what you're looking at, right? And for a software, traditionally in software world, we use analytical tools and databases and dashboards for this. Now, if you want to understand now how an application actually is programmed and how the inner working is, you have to go down into you have to get into the code, and you have to get into how is the application defined in the database to give you that understanding. And Ozgar is doing that. Ozgar is loading the code and provides you insights into the code on what functionality is implemented in what the data model is in terms of what are dependencies between components. So Ozgar gives you that insight, and it gives you a documentation for that, and it gives you also a chatbot where you can just simply ask questions, and you mix these two ways based on your preference. You can ask directly questions, or you can use the documentation that Ozgar generates for you. Typically, Ozgar, when you ask a question, it actually gives you then references and pointers to the documentation. And when you read the documentation, you can find something, ask again question, a chatbot. So there is a smooth, seamless integration between the documentation and the chatbot. But ultimately, Ozgar.ai, what really the heart of Ozgar.ai is a knowledge base in the backend that knows a lot about your application. I often try to describe what we have in the backend. It's kind of a data warehouse for the code and the metadata in the database. We built very similar structures in the backend, our knowledge base, but conceptually it's very, very similar. It's like in a data warehouse. The main thing often people say in data warehouse is the relationship between the data, not so much the data itself. For Ozgar.ai, it's similar. We have all the artifact of an application stored, like subroutines or classes or database tables, and we connect these artifacts with meaningful relationships, and this is what we surface when we generate documentation or ask questions.
Right, because essentially this is what differentiates Ozgar from something like Cursor, right? Because your goal is not to write new code and to create greenfield things. Your goal is to understand deeply what is out there in all ways, in terms of context, right? In terms of how the database works, in terms of what the code does, and in terms of how they interact architecturally within the system, such that you can maintain it. And this is immensely powerful. What makes Ozgar unique in this regard? And kind of the cursor for legacy. I just wanted to use the cursor for something.
Ozgar itself, as it stands, it's actually an analytical system. I consider it as an analytical system. And Cursor is a coding refactoring solution. So there's quite a different goal that you have when you use an Ozgar or a Cursor. One thing that I like to compare often with is with Ozgar, we have the vision that we follow the traditional software development lifecycle that we use to follow engineering best practices. So how we do it? So we think of what the problem is, right? And we understand the problem deeply as good as we can, put this into requirements, we write it up, and then we think about the solution. And the solution is usually a design doc or a write-up, how we actually implement it. We review this with the team, and then we do the implementation. And then for the implementation, we break it down usually in tickets, and we put the structure to it, and then we test it. When after implementing it, we deploy it, and then the maintenance is the last phase. So with Ozgar, we actually try to follow these stages. Now with Cursor, I often feel Cursor tries to skip all these stages and say, screw it, we don't need a design doc, we go from a vague idea directly to implementation. For very complex solutions, for big changes, this I think simply doesn't work. This is where you generate something as a human and you just don't know anymore what the AI is doing. And with Ozgar, always we follow the steps the traditional way, and it's easier for the human to follow what Ozgar is actually doing. And at some point, Ozgar will produce, this is a feature planned very near future, that we generate design docs out of the knowledge base. And after that, we will generate at some point also code and do something similar that Ozgar does. But on the way, the human always can follow what, and there are artifacts generated the old-fashioned traditional way, so to speak, and Ozgar can do that.
Exactly, and that's immensely valuable.
Where Ozgar is different to a cursor. Cursor very often is, it's sometimes considered so as the magic bullet that just gives you right away the right solution. And the number one challenge is always understanding what the thing is doing, right? And that's very, very dangerous.
Exactly. I remember when was it Gemini 1.5 when it came out, and they said, okay, here's this long COBOL program and it can translate it. This isn't the issue with the legacy system. You have much more than just the code to translate, right? And that obviously the model itself doesn't have enough context based on just giving it that piece of code.
Yeah, there is also one other aspect that often I feel people forget this. When an engineer uses a cursor and builds a solution, I think it's not enough that the engineer alone understands what the AI is doing. What is essential is that the entire team understands what the AI was doing, because we want to have a code that can be easily shared across team members. So that only one engineer knows what the AI was doing is not enough. It needs to be written in a way that the entire team knows how the solution is built. And that's how you scale a team also in terms of when you build a solution. And that's why these intermediate artifacts are essential to do the sharing and collaboration within the team, right? So otherwise you have these one-man monolith solutions, what has other negative side effects in terms of how you maintain such a solution.
This is basically the technical debt that also will sprawl from all of that vibe coding, right? Because ultimately someone will get to something
It's a big trend right now. Absolutely, yeah.
And then at some point,
what is great for prototyping, by the way, amazing tool for but for building production code, don't do it. I mean, you should use it in a different way.
And just for context for listeners, what Ozgar is tackling initially is the IBM legacy system space. And legacy system space is essentially, larger. There are systems around Oracle, there are systems around SAP, there are systems around various technologies, Microsoft and whatnot. But even considering something like IBM, the use cases, the systems in production, those are not, your classic web app and web store and something like that. Those are mission critical systems for large companies, government organizations, things that have to run 100% correctly. You can't just vibe code your way into maintaining them. That is that has not worked and has not worked for good reasons. But the intermediate artifacts is essentially Ozgar is basically acting as like a good engineering manager, analyst, and documentation engineer that will provide you with the entire chain of information to maintain your systems. Can you talk a little bit about the use case for onboarding new engineers on a project like this or on a system like this? How does this interaction with the AI work? Let's say I'm a new engineer. I come, Ozgar is running, connected to the database, to the Confluence, to the whatever. What do I do?
Yeah, the way Ozgar works is essentially when you set up Ozgar will ask you about where your code is. and connect to your code repository, and you need to ask where your database sits, and it will connect to your database catalog. After that, it will crawl your code. It will crawl also the database catalog, load all information into an internal database, what we call knowledge base. And it will prepare all the connections between application artifacts. It creates a so-called knowledge graph. For every application artifact will be a node in a graph, and we connect the nodes with relationships like when a certain class or a certain subroutine uses a table, there will be a connection, or the table relationships, there will be connections in the graph. And that is, we index the data also in multiple ways. So with a vector index, with full text index, and the knowledge graph has its own index. And this helps us then to have a very rich information that can be used from AI agents. And the AI agents, they can ask now the different index data in various ways and from various dimensions and angles. And this is when we have typical chatbot query, or when you generated documentation, the AI agents work in parallel and use this index data. And while they work in parallel, every agent focuses on different aspects of the application. Maybe just focusing on the data, or just on the code, or on security. Depends on what the AI agent is responsible for. And as a last step, we consolidate all the insights and give it them back to the user. The output can be also generating then the final documentation page. And this is, so ultimately, Ozgar is a RAG solution, retrieval augmented generation. And with this approach I just described, this is how we try to identify all relevant data that is necessary to answer a question. So we try to have no gaps in our understanding. And doing this with multiple agents, with multiple indices, in parallel, we have the best chance to have all relevant information in place to give the user a high quality answer.
Right. So, and then after, with that capability, let's say the company installs it, connects it, and then a new user gets onboarded, right? A new engineer. They would interact with that system, and that would significantly shorten the time needed to understand the system, because you wouldn't be asking a model that has no understanding. You'd be talking to your system. And the interesting thing about Ozgar is it'll give you, because of the graph situation and the built out knowledge base, it isn't a wrapper really that just would give you the code, based on a simple prompt. It will basically give you a solid understanding and would not hallucinate key artifacts, right? That's the main thing, is you want to rely on a system that does not hallucinate when it comes to your database, your main artifacts, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I like to compare it, many years back, you may know, when people went with a car to a different country and there was no Google Maps in place. So like, what did people do?
MapQuest.
Well, they had their paper maps, and then they try to find out where they go, and that's it, right? And nowadays, Google Map opens the city for you that you're currently driving through, right? You actually not just drive through. You realize there's a really great restaurant, or there's an amusement park. You identify all these opportunities. Ozgar is similar with an application, right? So it's not just the narrow path just to the problem you're trying to solve, that you look this up. You actually find out, related information. You find out opportunities for simplification. You have a deeper understanding what the application is actually doing, which gives you these opportunities.
Right. This is something that, if looking at your roadmap for the product, I mean, this is huge. I think also my audience at this point who was listening realizes this is a very significant achievement in this space, and the opportunity is to just understand more and more of these legacy technologies, and as you mentioned, move along the software development lifecycle with more agentic approaches is I mean, it's ginormous. I think something like in the payment space alone, is like $3 trillion per day get processed by COBOL-based transaction systems. The importance of these systems that run in production cannot be overstated, and having an application like Ozgar that understands, or like a set of agentic tools, or whatever the new terminology you want to call it, is extremely valuable. It's something we just didn't have uh, uh, in this as a possibility, and we didn't even think about it a while ago. I know that it's the entire team, and you spent a lot of time thinking through the ways to achieve this. What are the important next features that you guys want to release to make it, as you're expanding Ozgar and the clients on it?
Yeah, so we have different visions how to expand the Ozgar platform. I think we start now with a solid foundation to have a good understanding what the application is doing. Now the next step is to how do we use this in the best way, right? So for as next step, and also how do we increase the knowledge base? I mean, right now we support a certain set of languages, so we plan to add more programming languages, object-oriented languages, JavaScript, front-end languages. And with a click of a button, you can then have a documentation of for example, a request from a front end that is written in JavaScript to the backend that is written in COBOL or Java programming language. And the documentation can show you every step on the way on how the request is processed. So the future for Ozgar is also that it can handle very well also mixed system integrations in any kind of form, and has a deep understanding for that, for documentation, but also when you have chatbot question that it fully understands the front-end side and the back-end side. So there is this expansion in terms of programming languages and the layers of the application. Earlier I mentioned also the expansion in terms of software development lifecycle. I think for Ozgar most interesting is there is one space, the coding and refactoring space. There are pretty good tools out there like the cursors and the windsurf and so on. So we are actually focusing more on what's before and what's after. So what's before is anything that has to do with understanding, specification, design. And then at some point there's the implementation, but we focus more on the earlier stages. So that's why we are working on integration into Confluence and Jira so that you can use Ozgar to generate a design doc, or you have a written design doc and you can ask Ozgar to do a review of your existing design doc. So this will be all possible. Ozgar will be also able then to generate the breakdown of the tickets for a certain design doc, give you estimates for the various work items. When the tickets then are executed, Ozgar will give you a project summary and a project update out of the box. So it will be also a useful tool for project managers. So these are also functionality that Ozgar will cover. Now we can use then the tickets for writing, on design docs to ask also the LLMs to do an implementation. But there's another interesting use case that we see is troubleshooting of an application, right? When there are, for example, exceptions or logs or certain problems that occur in a system, so that you can ask Ozgar what to do in that case or what code caused this. So this is something then actually when the application is already running, right? And more when it comes to operations where Ozgar can be a good assistant.
Right. So essentially, just to break it down also for the listeners again, it's just not the developer, right? It's the systems analyst. It's the project manager. It's the various people that are involved in keeping a system like this up to date, alive, etc. And one of the things that I believe you lightly mentioned, but maybe you can say a few words on, is it actually will take your feedback so the system learns. What you guys are doing with this is also filling gaps in the base models, in the foundation models, because they have not been trained on complex system like that in their entirety. So you would need to fully understand the context and application. It is inevitable that the human feedback on, oh, you got this wrong, or you got that wrong, and that flows back into it. And also the feedback on the design documents feeding back into the system and being up to date. So this is not what most people would do. And A lot of companies like this one-time POCs, they'll do a RAG. It's a one-time upload. It's exponentially more wrong with the passage of time, but that's not how Ozgar works, right? Can you say a little bit more about that feedback functionality?
Yeah, in Ozgar, we design Ozgar to keep always the human in control. It's not, so the Ozgar is always an assistant, a very smart assistant, but as human, you should always stay in control. And as human, you're ultimately always responsible what you do with that information. Now, if there is, so Ozgar will collect all the information it finds in code and database metadata. However, there is sometimes also tribal knowledge that is just not available in the code and in the database catalog. So Ozgar has this option that for expert users, you can add your special knowledge additional to the knowledge base. And you can do also revisions and overrides. You may find something that is not 100% correct, or you would like to add something to it or rephrase it. You can do this in Ozgar. So you can do so-called revisions and overrides of anything that you find in the documentation and any output of a chatbot. You can do a revision. And next time you ask that question, actually the revised answer will be in the output. So this is again an example where the human stays in control. If there is something you don't like what Ozgar is doing, you can say it, and Ozgar will next time will try to do it better.
Right. I think this is of extreme importance to make sure that some of that implicit knowledge we know through over the course of our practice and experience with systems like that there's legacy systems are maintained by legacy teams, and it's almost like a ritual to get introduced into the team. It takes months of getting around and understanding the system and getting this, let me tell you about how that works, because you can't really get that knowledge otherwise. Now, you would shorten that significantly. And I can already see a lot of, CEOs, CIOs thinking, well, how many FTEs can we remove, by having something like that? I think that is not the immediate idea, but in interest of someone listening from like a business perspective, yes, it is ultimately you are going to be able to achieve more with less people. Oftentimes you just don't have these people. And even if you get them on top, they're not really as productive. And even if you onboard lots of them, they aren't really, the marginal utility is not that high. So I think it's an excellent case for when the AI actually augments the work of an existing team and fills critical gaps of expertise that just you wouldn't have sitting around. You wouldn't have these teams anymore. You mentioned earlier that you can't, it's even difficult to teach the younger people you have to go back to the old books, right, of how things were done back then. You see this huge business side of it, like an impact on the business side?
There is one thing in general I always observe with these LLMs and chatbot solution. There's one big advantage with chatbot and LLMs is you can easily say in your natural language how you want the information, right? In what format or in what level of detail. You can just say it and you get it, right? This is the difference also in a Google search or in a ChatGPT. In Google search, you have to organize what other people wrote, right? It's not in your way. So the difference with ChatGPT, I explicitly say the way I want it, and ChatGPT will try its best to prepare it in the format I want it. And there is depending on what type of user you are, depending on what skills and understanding you have of an application, you would need different levels of details, and you're able to express that easily, right? If you not have that, you would have then to go back to books, and that is way too detailed often, and you have to assemble it yourself, finding out what's relevant. There's a lot of time that goes into that. This is what Ozgar says. Ozgar is a pure productivity play. It makes you really fast in finding relevant information by the way you want it. And within seconds. It might take you days to find that information if you would do it yourself. So that's what is Ozgar really good.
Yeah, exactly in that context. I mean, I'm thinking of a common use case in like M&A. You buy one of these companies that has one of these systems. You plug in something like Ozgar. Your engineers can quickly understand what these guys have in terms of asset of an application. the way that they just couldn't before. They would otherwise have to interview some of these developers and try to elicit knowledge. It takes forever. It's not as reliable. You would have a system that will objectively analyze it, and you can talk to it. I mean, this M&A case alone is like a business case. Even if obviously the goal of most companies would be to like, how many FTEs can we eliminate because we're paying that much per year to maintain these systems. I mean, it's just like a significant cost.
Given another example, just recently had a customer where someone retired to maintain an RPG application, and so that there was a handover to another team that should take care of it. And in this other team, they had some sessions to do a knowledge transfer, and this other team said, we even don't know what questions to ask, where to start with this gigantic application. And this is where Ozgar gave them already right away an insight what the application in general is doing, and then asking the good questions for a knowledge transfer. It was a great, tremendous help for the team to just get started and have an initial good understanding, to have a fruitful conversation. Typically, such knowledge transfer takes several months to just do the knowledge transfer and to just understand what the application is doing. And with Ozgar, you have a decent understanding within hours and days. So that is the opportunity with Ozgar to have a higher productivity.
Exactly, and also think. I mean, the opportunity. I mean, the cases that people can think of are just, it's just so many. And one thing that we discussed, like a project, you can look at not only pure operational systems. You could look at legacy analytical systems that you want to understand. The lateral complexity is higher. The depth of every individual thing, you can dig yourself into 3-4 days and understand kind of the lineage of something like a procedure. But the overall thing seems overwhelming to just see through for a human being. And having a system that understands it is just so powerful. And yes, that can retranslate to M&A decisions done correctly, to migration decisions. People would often look at these systems, be like, some systems are just end of life, right? And if you want to migrate it to like a modern platform, well, all of a sudden you're faced with this mountain of like legacy code, of like legacy interactions, relationships. People were, well, it'd be too risky. No one understands it. Better to just, gradually, And so I think people getting comfortable with Ozgar and being onboarded on it would just be able to take also better decisions in terms of the future development of the platform. Even if they intend to keep it, but still through integration, through mergers, through whatever, there might be great use cases to get away from it. And it's basically offloading and what the senior engineer would be able to tell you, and keeping it in that knowledge base for everyone to talk to, right?
Yeah, I think this is a good point, that the risk for change that people perceive, you have to always ask yourself, why is there a risk in the first place? And the risk often is caused by not understanding fully how it's working, right? And now let's say there's something that takes this problem away. What would you do then? And I think Ozgar is the tool for it, right? It takes
exactly. If you're a decision maker, you want to wrap your head around something, right? And if it's like, oh, I'm migrating these systems. Is it really? It's like, how many days per field are we spending? Something, even a metric that would otherwise be completely meaningless. But in a context of a very complex re-engineering effort, is you're very scared of the unknown unknowns. Like you don't know what you don't know, and that bothers you. If you have your team being able to quickly explore with the help of AI, a tool like Ozgar, with a clear documentation that, just surfing through it, you'd have confidence that it's solid, it's not hallucinated. Everything points to actual, entities and that are referenced to from the tool. Then that the confidence that it'll give you in taking further engineering decisions on it is just something you just didn't have before. Previously you had your architect giving you some boxes with some arrows through them and knowing, okay, that's what it looks like. Here's a few bullet points on the complexity. But this is also I mean, let's face it, very subjective. You'd ask, 3 different teams, they'll tell you different answers because they have like different perception of like how things should be. With the AI, you should be able.
there's something interesting I want to mention. You're very right when you say you ask different people, you say different things, right? Oscar will tell you how it's actually done in the code, and sometimes it surprises people. And I give you here some examples. In legacy application, often when you have a data model, relationships are not explicitly modeled as foreign key relationships, and this is just more by convention. And then the question is, what is the convention, and how are where are the relationships now? Right, is the question.
We don't do this anymore, right? It's not like,
But in all applications, still, maybe it's fixed now.
You can infer it, right? You can infer it through the usage, to the.
Well, yeah, that's the point. Oscar will use actually into the joins you're doing, and the SQL statements you write in your code. These will define your relationships. And they are nowhere defined really in a diagram or a model or in the documentation. There are sometimes relationships that people didn't see before. But Oscar will bring these to surface, and we'll have also create a data model and ER diagram where you see these relationships. And in the documentation, these relationships become visible. So there is a lot of reverse engineering of the actual code, and the actual implementation often looks more messy than people think.
Right. But also, sometimes I feel teams will tell you the opposite would be true, right? A backlog of out of regulatory, we need to add a field here for some small change in an application. And they'll tell you, oh, this will take 3 weeks, and we have to release it next quarter, and it'll cost so much. And you're sitting here as a decision maker, and like, what are you guys talking about? How complicated can it be, right? And so, are you starting to doubt your own team? It's not unheard of. Where they're being extra cautious? Where is it that they just don't know because they haven't looked at that particular part of the code, because they have not written it, someone else has written it. They know they can get it done, but they just don't know whether it'll take them 3 days or 3 weeks. They just don't know. And so you have also that estimation points. Exactly. If Ozgar, if you go to Ozgar, and it will tell you your average developer will need 3 days. Here's what they need to touch. Here's why we're confident that this is the case. Well, then that's it. You're not going to be planning for like 3 weeks spending on that feature and requesting that budget. I mean, this alone is just like one of that feature that you save, and you have like a backlog. Usually, if you're talking like a let's say a mid-sized bank running something like a COBOL system, I mean, they will have like a team working there permanently. I mean, even if you could save a few features, that already more than pays for like using the tool. It's like everything else is on top. So, what do you think about how teams will embrace that? Because sometimes that cuts into their subjective expertness of the system.
I think engineers in general like to information that is close to reality. Hate making assumptions. Especially leadership makes a lot of assumptions. Oh, that's so easy, just one field, done in one day. Well, engineers can now with Oscar say, well, what do I have to change? Oscar will give you a report, and you have to update maybe 10 programs and make updates in various tables, and you have a perfect justification what the effort is, right? With a click of a button, right? You don't have to spend hours and days to actually give a qualified answer that this takes long. So this is already really helpful for the engineers that need to do that change, to have this deep understanding. It's also good for the leadership to have a very quick feedback loop to make adjustments in their decision making. If they know the level of effort, then this might be a do or not do decision, or maybe looking into alternatives to do it differently. So there is this feedback cycles, and getting the information to make the right decisions is much faster using Oscar. This is good for leadership and also the engineers working on the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Consider a future like 2 years from now, a year and a half. I mean, the velocity of the field is so enormous, you can never tell. How far are we from like an agent that does some of the maintenance for trivial changes on its own and just reports on, oh, by the way, that is going to be deployed for this and that, and you don't have to worry. Documentation's been dated, code has been refactored, it is going to be deployed for this and for that. Just maybe a human have a look at it just in the name of due diligence, but that's about it. Are we far from that? Like, what's your realistic prediction?
I think this is what we encourage our customers doing, right? They can use Ozgar through our API and connect this to their workflows, whatever way they want it. And the customers have a way better understanding how their business works and how to leverage the knowledge now that we have available for troubleshooting, for maintenance, for improving their customer support process, for various processes within their company. So I see the big muscle to really grow Ozgar or use Ozgar the most impactful way is actually by customers integrating with Ozgar, using the API of Ozgar, then to leverage the information in the knowledge base for the workflows within the companies. Of course, we will also build out different agents, making our agents more sophisticated. There will be some certain use cases that we double down on. I mentioned a few that we support in the software lifecycle processes that we really want to get good at in writing specification and design docs, and at some point maybe the troubleshooting of for an application, that this is a good use case for us. But also we encourage our customers to do their own integrations, and we learn from the customers. I'm 100% confident that over the next couple of months we will learn use cases from customers that are super exciting, that we will go after, that we today is completely not on the radar.
Right. Yeah, and so basically what you're saying is that, you know, they can already kind of build an agent based on Ozgar to do just that maintenance case. Like if they want to spend time on that.
Yeah. So an agent of a customer can use the way our agent use our knowledge base. A customer can write their own agents and use the knowledge base the same way as we do.
It seems like context is the biggest thing, you know, the most valuable thing today. Where do you see MCP, you know, just on a more broader technology question? A lot of initiatives are there for various things, but like, you know, the agents that do everything are just not there yet. What is the missing link, and where do you see this going in terms of
I think there's
getting
a bit more
content?
Yeah. So to be honest, so there's this MCP is a very hyped topic, and people are very excited about it and think this is the holy grail right now. I personally think it's not. If just for some food for thought, if MCP works the way it is designed, or as people think of it, so then my question is, why didn't we create many years ago an ACP protocol and just skip all the data warehouse and just connect to the source systems and call it in an analytical context protocol and call it good? So why did we create data warehouses, right? And for the same answer, there is something missing. There's something we do in data warehouses that we don't do in operational systems. Machine learning AI solutions are analytical systems. So there are all these data aggregation, data staging, data cleaning, data pre-processing that we do in data warehousing. That is missing in MCP, right? We need to find a way, let me rephrase that. We need to find a way to do that also for MCP. Right? And if you're not able to do it, you will have all these problems that you would have with analysis systems when you not have a data warehouse, right? You have scaling issues, you have data quality issues. And with just putting an MCP protocol in front of a source system doesn't make this problem go away.
Exactly.
So you need a bit more than that.
And it's almost like we're at the confluence of something that these analytics world, data world, and data engineering world, it was always separate from like software engineering. It was always separate from like designing systems with where you know they either thought about function or they thought about data. But now, in order to get the maximum out of AI and agents, you kind of have to think both, right? You can't ignore the advantage of a warehousing system that would provide you with analytical knowledge, right?
The thing that MCP solves well, and there's a use case for it. It gives you real-time information. It's not maybe in the format and the quality you would like to have to ask sophisticated questions, but it's real-time. So there's a certain class of questions that you can address really well with MCP. I think so. It depends a bit on the domain and of the complexity of the questions you have, whether it's a good solution or not. But it's not, I think MCP is not the holy grail fit for all the analytical solutions out there to that you can just connect chatbots to it and you ask any question you want. And so it depends a bit what questions you ask, what kind of data are behind the MCP protocol that is queried, and whether this works well or not. MCP, the big advantage is it's real time, right? You connect directly to the source data. There is a big advantage of for certain class of problems, a certain class of questions.
Right. Yeah, I provocatively asked the MCP question. I mean, we heard someone recently say, "Oh, our system uses MCP and not RAG anymore. RAG, we don't do this anymore."
But for Ozgar, at some point, I do see for us, it's to expose Ozgar with the MCP protocol. That would be a natural something we definitely do sometime next year. But but there is with Ozgar, it is already all the missing information that I mentioned before to get the right information, that this is what we do within Ozgar. We do the data staging, the data cleaning, the integration, connecting the data so that we have a rich foundation to answer chatbot questions or chatbot queries. So Ozgar is a good foundation for MCP. I've been talking more about MCP solutions like, there are now pretty every source system, whether ERP system or a wiki system, is just exposed with the MCP protocol. It's for simple lookups that works well, but as soon as you ask more complex questions and you connect data from various sources or documents, then usually answer is not the
exactly
one.
back what you mentioned. Exactly what you mentioned earlier with the case with classic applications, where as soon as your operational system can give you a simple answer, but you have to build a complex analytical system to be able to answer complex analytical questions. That was always the case, and that seems that this is the case also with AI, and that's there's a little bit of comfort in that historical knowledge. We will talk again. It's been an immense pleasure to have you as a specific group colleague, as a guest here. And I hope it was interesting for everyone listening who is battling legacy systems. So thanks so much. And I'll link all the information on Ozgar. We'll do more on Ozgar to highlight all the very cool things that you guys are doing with the Ozgar team. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivo. I enjoyed very much our conversation.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.